Good evening and welcome to episode 3 of City Century's RCC webinar series. I'm your co-host for this series, Paul Leamy, and I've been working in city law for over 25 years, the last 10 as a city firm partner practicing in the real estate sector. And I've recently taken on a role with City Century's project team as their principal advisor and ambassador.
Evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm also your co-host of Ask CC. My name's Finnley Sprakes. I am working this year in my gap year as City Century's Engagement and Research Associate. And I'm also, like many of you, an aspiring solicitor apprentice.
And RCC is very much your show. It's designed to answer some of the questions that you may not have had the opportunity to ask at the CC live events. We'll endeavour to cover all of the questions that you've already asked in the sign-up forms, and please do pop any additional questions you may have in the Q&A function on your screen. Over the course of the series, we're covering all stages of the solicitor apprenticeship application process, from researching and shortlisting firms, to making applications and completing online tests, right through to preparing for final in-person assessment centres. And we'll even have a bonus episode on the logistics of relocation to the city.
As promised in our last episode, tonight we've got an excellent panel yet again. So it's bound to be a brilliant session. For our third episode tonight, we're going to centre around all things assessment centres, from preparation for your written exercises and group exercises to in-person partner interviews. So to introduce our panel tonight, we have got Kevin Howes, a partner from Slaughter and Main. We've got Annabelle Hale, a senior early careers manager at Wedlake Bell. We've got Jake Slorek, a solicitor apprentice at Taylor Wessing, and also Ube Ashfaq from Freshfields, who's also a solicitor apprentice. Just as a disclaimer, as we always do as well, each of the panel will speak from their own experiences and the approach that their firms take to each stage of the assessment centre process. So we do always recommend, as we do in every episode, that you do your research specific to each firm that you will be applying to.
Okay, so let me kick off with a question for our two solicitor apprentices. Can you tell us a bit about your experience at the assessment centre at your firm and the types of tasks that you had to undertake? Jake, can I start with you on that one?
Yeah, sure. So we started nice and easy, an icebreaker. It was just something light-hearted to get to know people. We had to represent the firm's values through Lego, so that was quite fun. It was then on to the presentation task. It was an individual presentation, client-based, a real estate scenario. We'd had 2 weeks to prepare for it. It was a 20-minute presentation, 10 of which was presenting and 10 of which was answering questions. So I had to do some research, structure an answer, and it was difficult to be well prepared, because if you're well prepared, then you can limit the questions that they ask. And that's what I found was best in my presentation. But after that, it was the interview. This was about an hour. It was on the firm's values and what they're looking for in an apprentice. And they also asked situational questions. One of the questions was something along the lines of, if you were behind on a deadline, how would you organize yourself to make sure that you hit it? And someone answered it, I wouldn't be behind on a deadline. That's not a good way to answer it. So please engage with the situation. Put yourself in that scenario because they're testing you for qualities. You also want to think, why that firm? You need specific information on it. If you can say your answer without saying the firm's name and they can still tell you're talking about that firm, that shows that you've got a good level of detail. And then after that, there was a written task. This was about 45 minutes to test analytical and written skills. It was drafting a letter in response to a client scenario.
Thanks, Jake. And that's bringing back fond memories of me as an assessor at the Taylor Wessing assessment centres. Ube, what's it like at Freshfields? Is it a different process?
I would say my experience was broadly in line with what Jake experienced. So I remember the day starting off with breakfast and meeting the other candidates. That's one of the things that I would actually really recommend you do. Speak to the other candidates as much as possible early on, because that helps to break the ice and it also helps you feel a lot more natural in the process. You're usually going to end up working with some of them in the group task anyway. So having already spoken to them makes the whole collaboration process a lot smoother. We then actually had a talk from partners at the firm about the firm's history, the wider work that they do, which again helps you feel comfortable in the environment that you're in because they know it's quite stressful. And that's before any assessed exercises actually begin. Again, it also reinforces that the assessment center at Freshfields and at every other firm is a two-way process. The people there want to get to know you, but at the same time, they also want you to get a feel for the culture at the firm to make sure it's the best environment for you. And then moving on to the assess tasks, the first one I did was a group activity. So we were given a bundle of information on various different business options, and we had to work together to select one of them. In this task, I would say initially it can feel quite scary because you don't really know exactly what they're looking for. But one of the things that I wish I knew was that disagreement there is completely fine. And often disagreeing is helpful because it brings a new perspective into things. But the thing that is important is the way you are disagreeing. A really good approach that I have found was recognizing the value in someone else's idea and then bringing in your own perspective rather than just shutting them down completely, which is quite disrespectful. So, for example, saying something like, I can see what you mean here, but I was thinking more along the lines of X, Y, and Z. Then the other thing that I also just did quite a bit in that task was just bringing others into the conversation by referencing their points and actually developing it further. Because one, that then shows that you're actively listening, and two, it shows that you're someone that is able to bring the group forward. And then the other thing I think is also worth pointing out is it's definitely worth being intentional about when you speak in the group task, having more focused contributions that actually add something unique to the table is a lot more effective than just speaking frequently without progressing the discussion, because then you're at risk of just repeating yourself. The second task then, like Jake's, was very similar. It was an individual exercise with an associate. So I was given a scenario to read, and I was then asked to present my thinking for the first few minutes. And then after that, the associate asked me some follow-up questions where they essentially challenged my reasoning, playing devil's advocate in a way. And they then introduced new points to see how I would respond to that. So there, they're just seeing whether you're someone that can explain your reasoning and how you'd adapt when new points come to light. The thing to keep in mind there is it's completely fine to stand by your analysis, and you should absolutely do that. But it's just as important to show flexibility when that new information changes the picture of things. So be open and receptive to new information. And then the final task that I was given was an interview with a partner and another associate, which focused more on competency based questions. So we discussed some of my experiences that helped me develop skills like resilience, initiative, problem solving, and how those experiences have prepared me for the demands of a solicitor apprenticeship. And then also, that was just a good opportunity to ask questions based on some of the wider research I had done on the firm. And again, that just reinforces it is a conversation rather than a one sided interview.
Sure, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you both. Those were really good answers. And I think it's great to see sort of a bit of insight into different kinds of firms' approach, because it's really good to hear that it's not one fixed approach and every single firm will take the same timetable of events for an assessment centre. If I come to you, Kevin and Annabelle, on this, if I start with you, Kevin, how does the structure of your assessment centre differ, and how do you think it's best to prepare for that and adapt to different scenarios on the day?
Yeah, thanks, Finnley. I mean, what was really interesting about listening to Ube and Jake is I think there are a lot of similarities, but actually there are also a lot of differences with our process. So I'll speak through our process in a moment, but actually I think you're exactly right. But the important thing for people to do is exactly what they're doing now, is do your research and know what you're coming into, because even though we're all getting at the same things, we're all looking for very similar outputs, the way we get there is different. And so you want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward, so understanding what's going to happen on the day. But also, frankly, I feel a lot more comfortable and in my element if I know what's going to happen on my day and if I know what's coming up. So it gives you that, by knowing exactly what will flow, what will happen, you will be more confident on the day and do your best. As for May, so you submit your documents in advance, so you fill in a form. And you do a situational judgment test in advance. So it's an online test. It's going for similar thing that Ube was talking about, but a range of scenarios and a couple of answers that you can choose from. You do that in advance. And then on the day you come into the office, it's not a group situation. So there isn't a group of people. You will come in very much like an old school interview. Just before your interview, you'll be shown to an area and you'll do a written exercise. So you'll be given, for example, maybe an article to have a look at. You'll be given a short task and you'll be doing a short written exercise just to see how you adapt information, put it down on paper. There'll then be an interview with two senior people, so often two partners, or maybe one partner and one senior counsel at Slaughter and May. That will take an hour and it's very conversational. I really liked what someone said earlier about it being a two-way street. So it's about us assessing whether you will be a good fit at Slaughter and May, and you assessing whether Slaughter and May would be a good fit for you. So no one's out there to trip you up. There are no trick questions. It's not pre-rehearsed and planned. It is a conversation for an hour or so. You then get shown around the office by one of the trainees or one of our solicitor apprentices. I hate to spoil it, but the Slaughter and May office isn't particularly exciting. That's not the point of the tour. The point of the tour is really just to give you time with one of our junior lawyers to have a frank conversation, again, to understand, that is your opportunity to speak to someone at the firm doing the job that you want to do and get to know the firm really well. You're then taken back downstairs and there's a mini interview with our HR team. So you'll probably be asked a lot of the same questions, but by a member of our HR team. And the only thing, our HR team are lovely, and it's a very casual part of the interview. The only thing I would say is to make sure you treat that as seriously as you do the partner part of the interview, because some people relax a bit too much or are disrespectful to the HR people, and actually their view is just as important as the senior lawyers. And that's it for our process. So again, very different from, I think, Jake and Obey's experiences, but again, lots of similarities underpinning it.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that. If I come to you on that, Annabelle, what's it like at Wedlake Bell?
Yeah, hi everyone. So our process, we do treat it very much as an assessment centre, and candidates can either pick a morning slot or an afternoon slot. And if someone has further to travel, for example, if you let us know in advance, we can pre-book you into the afternoon slot to make sure that you're not rushing. But we also have a few different kind of different activities, which would be quite similar to some of the other firms. But we have a group exercise at the beginning, which again is not about, winning the group exercise, your team. We just have a scenario, kind of pick the best option for the firm, and then do a presentation to two members of the early careers team about, why you've made that choice. There's then an attention to detail exercise, which is just reviewing some documents and making suggestions. And then we also have a case study as well. This one is reviewing documents and then typing up a written answer. And it's all kind of based around a scenario. You're a solicitor apprentice, your supervisor needs this. And generally the feedback that we get is that people find that really interesting, and they really enjoy that part, which is great. And then we also have an interview with a member of our committee who do all of our recruitment interviews, and then a member of the HR team will be in that interview as well. We also do a coffee with some of our solicitor apprentices and a chance to have an office tour as well. So that's really just to kind of, give you an opportunity to speak to them, find out how they found it, what their experiences are, and kind of see a bit more of the firm. We do also offer a webinar a week before the interview day, which everyone will be invited to, just to really run through the structure, give some advice, see what questions people have. And really just give people to kind of, a chance to find out a bit more. And I think, we understand it's really intimidating coming in for interview days. So I think we try and do that just to give an extra chance to kind of meet more people at the firm. And then if someone's joined that when they come in on the day, at least the early careers teams will be familiar faces as well, which I think is helpful.
Thank you, Annabelle. Appreciate that. If I pass back to you, Paul, I think it's been really useful to get some context on how each firm run their assessment days. If I pass back to you for the next question.
Yeah, brilliant. And this one's back to the apprentices. And thinking back, which part of your assessment centres did you think was the toughest to prepare for? And how do you think you best overcame that? Can I turn to you first on that one, Ube?
Yep, so I would say one of the first things that I realized I need to think about a bit more was actually working on how I show my passion for the firm. That is a lot easier said than done. I found that whenever I was reading things online, I thought they were incredibly interesting and exciting, but I knew that I had to present that in a way that was actually authentic. And I soon realized that the best way for me to do that is by actually doing effective research on the firm. a key point there is your research on the firm should be a continuous process. I speak to a lot of other aspiring apprentices, and they perceive research as a tick box exercise, something they'll do like an hour before submitting their application, and they'll then reuse the same research for the whole application process. Please don't do that. I'd recommend actually having a document for each of the firms that you're applying to, and then every time you come across something interesting, whether that's a deal on Little Law or something on LinkedIn, put it in the document. I did that, and I found that over time it meant that I could develop a really solid understanding of what the firm's doing and its approach to particular areas of law. For Freshfields, for example, we've also got a news and insight section on our website that you're able to filter through by practice area. So you are able to find matches or transactions that are aligned with your interests. And this is going to be a bit of a shameless plug here. Apologize to those of you that have attended other Freshfields events because you'll be sick of me recommending this. But I would also really recommend each of you subscribe to the Fresh Perspectives newsletter on LinkedIn. It's a really good way of keeping up with what's going on in the firm, as well as wider issues and industry developments. Then, when you're actually in the interview, don't be afraid to use that research to show what interests you. In my Freshfields Assessment Centre, for example, I ended up having a debate with the partner about a particular aspect of the firm's international strategy. That made me stand out because it showed I actually care about this work and that I have opinions on it. And then in my assessment center for another firm, in the interview, I mentioned something so niche about a tech initiative that the firm had worked on that neither of the partners interviewing me had heard of it. But again, that's what kind of made me memorable. And then I would say a second challenge was actually just preparing for the written task, because they are fundamentally different to your GCSE or A-level exam questions, in that those tasks are not really designed to test your ability to memorize information. Instead, they're testing how you can absorb information, break it down, and then communicate that in a really succinct manner under time pressure, because those assessments are timed. And even in the written task, there's a lot of variation in what some firms might give you. Some might use a proofreading exercise where you have to spot spelling mistakes or clarity issues. Others, which I saw a lot often based on my own experiences, give you a dense bundle of information and they'll then ask you to summarize specific points of information or answers targeted to specific questions. Going to my first assessment center, of course, I had no idea what to expect whatsoever. But then once I had actually done one, I knew how I could prepare for the future ones. So I practiced reading really dense articles from the BBC or the Financial Times on a wide range of topics like scientific and political stories. And I read those articles for no more than 3 minutes at a time. And I would then immediately bullet point every single thing I could remember, just because that allows you to improve your ability to break down information and also to separate what's important from what isn't, just because a lot of the time there is a lot of background information and it's your job to split what's useful and what isn't. And then just one final tip there is sometimes when you're in the written task, you're not able to understand where exactly you need to start. So I found using a framework like the PESTLE framework really helpful. So if you're thinking about things from a political, an economic, a social, a technological, a legal, and an environmental perspective, you immediately have a structured way to approach almost any business problem they give you in the written task. So you know exactly where to start, and that way you can make an effective use of your limited time as well.
Brilliant, thanks. And Jake, what did you find the toughest part of Taylor Wessing's process, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, I think every process will have the most difficult thing to prepare for. So I've picked a more general one that was quite personal to me. I kind of struggled preparing for the confidence aspect of it, because it's obviously a very daunting thing going to an assessment center, meeting a bunch of people you don't know in a very competitive scenario. I think that's quite difficult to prepare for. There's not really any way to prepare for it. Many people at this stage won't have had a job, which is where you develop a lot of social skills. So I think it's really an indicator of if you've got the right firm that they're able to help you overcome that confidence thing. So like I said, we had the icebreaker to get talking to the other apprentices. And just throughout the day, it was really easy to talk to people at the farm. Like my interview, by the end of it, I was just having a chat with the interviewers because they were both really nice people, really welcoming, and wanted to actually know about me, like outside of a interview. And then it is obviously a conscious effort on your behalf to make an effort meeting people, shaking hands, smiling for the whole day. So it's really just putting that effort in to overcome the kind of imposter syndrome that you might have going into it.
Sure, and just sort of to expand on some of that, how did you generally prepare for the different exercises for the assessment centre? And if you look back on it now, do you think you would have done anything differently? And have you got any tips for those listening in as to what they should be doing to ensure that they're fully prepared?
Yeah, so the presentation, it was all quite technical stuff. So I used AI for a lot of it to do the research. Obviously, don't get it to make your presentation for you, but at this stage, you're not expected to have the legal research skills to actually go out and find specific legislation. So I think that AI can give a really clear overview. Then obviously verify everything and put it into a logical structure. But I think you should also consider out of the box options. I know that on our brief, it gave us two options to look at, but it also encouraged us to think about other options that could apply. So I did that, and I think that quite helped me stand out. The interview, it's just research about the firm, which has been said by both Ube and Annabelle and Kevin as well. Research is really key for the interview, so you've got some detail going into it. But then, in terms of preparing and practicing, I think just doing it with your family is best. Because writing stuff down, you can easily forget it, but once you've said it out loud, you've kind of got some form of muscle memory that you've said it before and you know what to say. In terms of what I could have done better, I think being part of the firm, I've now got more insider knowledge. I obviously have more details about the firm that I could have used in the interview. So I think for aspiring apprentices, you can kind of emulate that by reaching out to people on LinkedIn and getting their perspective on what makes the firm really stand out for them.
Brilliant, thanks. And can I come to you, Ube, on the same sort of question? Is there anything you would have done differently if you had your time again? And how did you sort of generally go about preparing for the assessment centre?
Yeah, I would say the bulk of my preparation for the assessment center actually came from just making sure I had done really solid research into the firm, because I knew having that information would be applicable to every single task, and you could draw on that information in all of the settings that you're in. So most of that research actually came from the firm's website. I spent quite a bit of time going through any notable deals that they've worked on, the practice areas the firm is especially dominant in, how the firm's international approach works, any relevant community impact or pro bono opportunities they have. And just in general, I would say firm websites are a gold mine of information. If you're using them properly, you can find every single thing you need in one place, which is great. And then in terms of looking back, I would say one thing that I think I could have done better was actually just being a bit more selective with how deep I went into the legal details of transactions I was reading about. Very early on, I tried to memorize every aspect of a detail, every aspect of a deal that I was learning about. So that included the legislation, the legal mechanics, and that level of detail I now know just isn't necessary. One of the things that I realize is if you introduce a technical term in an interview, you should be expected to you should expect to be asked about them. So for example, I remember in one of my interviews I mentioned the word securitization when mentioning a transaction, and I felt really cool for doing that. But one of the partners then asked me for further details about that then opened the door to a deeper discussion, which I was fortunately prepared for, but it just made me a lot more conscious of actually being deliberate in what I choose to raise. And then the second thing I would say is actually spending more time thinking about how the research you're doing connects to you as a person. The firm already knows what initiatives they're doing as well as what deals they're working on. What they really want to understand is why is that a point of significance to you? So I had gathered loads and loads of information, including the firm's 100 years history, but that didn't actually translate into something that I could personally talk about. So what helped there was just linking my own research to the goals that I have, as well as my experiences. So when I mentioned something about the firm's community impact work, I would link that more to the volunteering work I've done at a food bank or the charity I founded. When I mentioned something to do with AI in the firm's lab, where they work on emerging technologies, I would link that to my own chatbots that I created and how I would want to develop those skills in the future. So just really make sure that you focus on points that actually connect with your own personal experiences and your ambitions, because that makes a really compelling narrative and it allows the firms to actually understand you a lot more holistically, rather than just showing that you're someone that is able to revise and absorb a ton of information.
That's brilliant. Thank you both so much. Finn.
Yeah, thank you, Paul, and thank you both for such thorough answers. I know they're, for myself, really, really useful going forward this year. Annabelle, if I come to you first on that, before I come to Kevin, I know that for myself last year and for this year, assessment centres really do feel like the pinnacle of an application process, and it feels really like the make or break. What is it firms are actually looking to do here, and how do they use those assessment centres to whittle down the final few candidates to those that they'll make offers to?
Yeah, I think, everyone who attends an assessment centre should bear in mind that, already to be invited, you've shown on paper that, you have all the requirements the firm are looking for. We get a lot of applications and it's a huge cut down. So to make it to the assessment day is a huge achievement in itself. And then I think, yeah, it's really just about the kind of preparation. So in terms of what we're looking for, we have key skills that we're recruiting for. So we are looking, but at the end of the day, we are looking for potential. We're not expecting someone to come in and have all the technical knowledge and kind of know everything. It is really a kind of potential that we're aiming to look for. So in terms of skills, we're looking for transferable skills. So teamwork, communication, attention to detail, good time management. And these are all things that people can demonstrate in different ways depending on their own experience. But I would really recommend, especially for the kind of interview part of the day, I would expect most firms are going to be asking some sort of kind of competency, motivational questions, and you can prepare in advance for them. And with that, it's really the balance between you want to prepare, but you also want it to sound, natural and engaging. If you kind of read out a scripted answer that you've memorized, it's not going to land in the same way. So my advice would really be to, more think about bullet points and like practice the delivery of those answers as well. As Kevin said, we are not trying to catch you out. The point of this is to put people, in an opportunity where they can speak to the firm, find out more, and hopefully, they can be given a good opportunity to really show what they can do and who they are as an individual. As I said, on paper, kind of everyone at that point, we think everyone would be a great candidate. So at that point, it's really about seeing who we think would be the best fit for Wedlake Bell and who would kind of make the most of our apprenticeship program. One thing I think that's really important is genuinely enthusiasm. Sounds a bit, basic almost. Obviously, everyone's enthusiastic, they're all applying, but it's a 6-year program. We need people to be enthusiastic, excited, and committed to seeing the program through start to finish. So I think being enthusiastic and showing that you are committed to the program and committed to completing the full 6 years, is a really important thing to get across. And unfortunately, when someone's nervous, I think that can hinder enthusiasm. So it's a really, important, I think, to try and harness any nerves and really kind of channel them into enthusiasm, into excitement. It's a fine line between those two emotions, I think. But yeah. I would say as well, all of the different areas that I mentioned in the assessment day, they're all important, they're all taken into consideration. So, as make sure that you're kind of putting as much into the group exercise as you are the interview. And that's why we have, it's quite a lot of assessments to do on one day, but we find it really helpful because it is so competitive that having, feedback from all the areas is really important. We will also provide feedback to everyone that attends the assessment day as well. So even if you are unsuccessful, it can still give you really hopefully useful kind of feedback and help as you prepare for other assessment days as well. And yeah, I think that's probably my top tips from our process.
That's excellent. Thank you, Annabelle. If I come to you on that, Kevin.
Yeah. So I mean, what I would say is that none of this is secret. So everyone is very open and honest about what they are looking for. And if you do your research, you can find exactly these answers on an individual firm basis. So it's things like the webinars Annabelle mentioned earlier,
Slaughter may do in-person events that everyone is invited to before the interview days, and there you can get a feel for it. You can understand exactly what people want, and that's the thing to do. This is all we are taking time out of our day with some very clever people. We go to those assessment centers or the interviews because we want to give you a job. And that's the thing to bear in mind when you approach all of this. We're looking for things. It's not secret, it's not an episode of The Traitors. We're not trying to trip anyone up. We are very open on our website, and all the firms present here today are very open on their website of exactly what they're looking for. So if you have a look at that before the day, you can think really how you will demonstrate that on the day. For us, our categories are so we look at intellect. So, are you kind of clever enough to do the job? It can be a very intellectual job. Again, if you're already at the kind of interview stage, then you have already got everything on paper and you need to be confident in that. But it's not just school grades, it's also things like in an interview scenario, in a discussion, can you hold your own? Can you think quickly on your feet? If you say something and the partner at a law firm disagrees with you, can you process that, or are you going to quickly say, okay, yeah, of course, no, I agree with you, or can you stand up for yourself? It's drive. So do you want to do the job? As Annabelle said, it's a 6 year program. And when I think back to myself when I was 18, and I've discussed this with Paul before actually, I could not have said what I was going to do in 6 years' time. So it's incredibly impressive that people can do that as solicitor apprentices and showing us that you've got that drive, you're really enthusiastic about it, that you're really excited about it is really good. A genuine interest in commercial law. The job we do, I think it's the best job in the world. If you don't like the job, if you're not genuinely interested in it, it could probably be the worst job in the world. So making sure you genuinely want to do it, everything Ube was talking about earlier, the things you find interesting about the job and demonstrating that. Interpersonal skills, so can you have a conversation? You've got to bear in mind that ultimately you would be a trainee at Slaughter and May, and so it's very likely you'll sit in an office with me for 6 months. I don't want a corporate robot. I don't want a corporate drone. I want someone I can have a nice conversation with. I want someone with a genuine personality. So, that's just be yourself as much as you can. It's a really tricky thing to say because it's obviously a really nerve-wracking day, but don't present the person you think we want to see. Bring yourself to the interview because we want to see you, and we want to see your personality and your interpersonal skills. And then independence of thought. Again, just can you think on your feet? When we're in a conversation, can you stand up for yourself? Everything Obey was saying about earlier, if you disagree with someone, can you do that in a respectful way but hold your own? Can you adapt your position, etc.? So again, I mean, our interviews are very conversational, but that's what ultimately we're looking for. That's a lot of words basically to say I think what we're looking for really is that someone's genuinely interested and someone is genuinely interesting.
Thank you. That's great, Kevin. If I come back to you both on that and sort of say, have you got any top tips that go beyond those qualities that you look for? Some smaller little top tips to make those really, really strong first impressions when you walk through the door on your assessment day. If I come back to you on that first, Kevin.
Yeah, so I mean, so our assessment day would be the interview day, and I think in an interview, honestly, my top tip is just to pause. So you will be having people will be asking you questions, and if you're anything like me, it's really tempting to answer the questions really straight away, fire back straight away, and as you're talking, you sort of hear yourself and you think, "Oh God, I don't think I meant to say that," or you don't quite make yourself pause, say, "Oh, thanks, Finn, that's a really good question," and pause and have a think. Have a sip of water. Take your time. You don't need to answer the question straight off the bat. We're not expecting you to come back with a perfect answer straight away. You can pause. You can say, look, yeah, thanks, Finn. I hadn't thought about it that way. It's a really interesting counterpoint and just holding your own. And it's the same if we look, there will be parts of the interview where we might intentionally start an argument. So we might be talking about a newspaper article and we'll say, look, Finn, what's your view on that? And you'll give us your view, and I'll say, funnily enough, as it happens, I disagree and I take the complete opposite view. We're not there. We don't want you then to say, oh, yes, sorry, yes, I completely agree. That's not what we're going for. We want you to be respectful, as Ube was saying earlier, but be able to hold your own. So again, is having those little phrases prepared that can give you that bit of time or can push back internally. And you can think of that all through the day. So, how will I buy a bit of time if I need to? If I find I've said the wrong thing, what is the phrase I'll use to slightly backtrack myself or apologize? And there's lots of phrases out there. Lawyers use these phrases all the time in their day-to-day jobs to buy a bit of time. It's completely fine for you to do the same in an interview. So just think about how you present yourself in advance.
Perfect. Thanks, Kevin. If I come to you on that one, Annabelle, have you got any top tips that go beyond those qualities you discussed and in terms of making that strong first impression?
Yeah, and yeah, definitely agree with all of Kevin's points. The pause as you take a sip of water feels like a long time to you, but it's absolutely nothing to the interviewers. Yeah, I'd say top tip really is be yourself. You may be able to pretend to be what you think people are looking for, a couple of hours on an assessment day, but it will be impossible to kind of try and do that for 6 years. And you won't be doing yourself any favors. All of our solicitor apprentices are all very different. They all have, very different kind of personalities, etc. We're not looking for a particular type of person. As I said, we are looking for, potential. More practically, I would say, think of some questions that you can ask. It's really great to have some questions to ask in an interview. Even better if they're kind of questions that have naturally come up throughout the interview that you can ask at the end. I think if you get to the end of an interview and you say, "Oh, and have you got any questions?" It can feel a bit flat if the candidate kind of says, "Oh no, I'm fine." It can give an impression that you're not very interested or you're not as enthusiastic, which of course isn't the case. So do try and have a couple up your sleeve, even if it's just asking the interviewer a bit about their own experiences at the firm, or what advice they would give to someone in kind of your position at the start of your career. I think it's a good way to kind of lead into some more natural conversation at the end.
That's great. Thank you, Annabelle. And with that answer, that brings us to the close of our initial section of the Q&A tonight. As I'll remind you, as I always do, at this point in the session, we're going to go to our application forms that you all submitted to get the joiner link for tonight. And you asked us some brilliant questions. Myself and Paul have gone through the sign-up forms, and we've selected a few questions that were reoccurring themes between our applicants tonight. I'll also note, as I've already been monitoring on the Q&A function as well, please feel free to pop some of those questions in that you don't feel that have yet been discussed. Ube, you've clearly captured an audience. There's a couple in there already for you. And specific to Freshfields to apply to, feel free to make those specific to one of our panel tonight, or also generic for all four of our panel members to discuss. So if I come to you again, Kevin, on this one, it often feels hard to get the balance right in a group setting between dominating and then also being too quiet and introverted. How do you think you get that balance right when you're in a social setting of the assessment centre?
So we don't have a group exercise component at Slaughter and May, so worth discussing with some of the people that have got that. But I mean, look, it is a tricky thing. It is an intentionally tricky thing. That is why it will be part of the assessment centres. Really, it is about that difficult balance between holding your own and being confident. So what Jake was saying earlier about making sure that you're robust. If you have a view, express it. That is why you are there. You have passed a threshold. You've got everything we're looking for on paper. So if you've got a view, we want to hear your view. At the same time, you should absolutely be polite and courteous to everyone around you. And this is honestly what I do on a day-to-day basis as a job, right? When we're negotiating a contract with Freshfields, when we're talking to our clients, etc., we have to be firm, we have to be robust. We're negotiating a position, but we have to be professional. And that's what we're looking for in the day, that you've got those foundations between. So be confident, realize you are there for a reason, and be polite, but hold your own.
That's great. Thank you. What about you, Annabelle? How do you think you can stand out and get that balance right in a group setting?
Yeah, I think it's important to make sure that, at all times you're being polite. Don't speak over people. If you both kind of talk at the same time, invite the other person to speak. There's plenty of time for everyone to kind of give their opinion. Our group exercise is not kind of, I know some firms have it as like a negotiation between two groups, which obviously is going to be a little bit more, you're going to be disagreeing on points, etc. Ours is more of a group together, all trying to find a solution. So whilst people might have different ideas that need to be discussed, it shouldn't really be too punchy, I'd say. But I think just make sure that you're, giving your opinion, you're kind of giving your input, but at the same time, it can be really good to be seen to also kind of invite other people to speak, bring others into the conversation. It can help as well, when there's a group and if everyone's trying to be polite and let everyone speak, it's good to kind of keep an eye on the structure, making sure that the group is kind of moving along and getting through the points. In ours as well, there's a presentation at the end, so it's also important that the group makes sure that they're taking enough time to prepare for the actual presentation as well as all of the discussion. So, and not necessarily, you don't need to be the timekeeper and kind of be reminding someone of, every kind of minute. but it can be good to, help be that person that kind of moves the group along and make sure that you are actually going to get to an outcome. And yeah, also I think make sure you read the instructions carefully, read the documents. So we give some set time for everyone to kind of quietly sit there and read through everything, and then there's discussion time. So it's a good opportunity to kind of bring forward the points that you found as well.
That's great. Thank you both. If I pass back to you, Paul.
Yeah, sure. And then this next one that we've had in on the sign up forms is one for the apprentices, and it's one that comes up quite often. So some of the audience members worry that nerves may take over, particularly during the interview process, as part of the assessment centre. How do you think it's best to compose yourself in that professional setting? And how did you prepare for it, and how did you cope with it on the day? Can I come to you first, Jake, on that one?
Yeah, I think in the interview, it's very much, as Kevin said, take a pause, take a breath. Everyone's really understanding of what you're doing. It's a very big decision to make at 18 years old, very high pressured scenario. If you just take a moment and say, can I just have a breather? They're going to respect that more than you just kind of mumbling out an answer that maybe isn't as good. And if you do think you've mumbled an answer, I would just, at the end of the interview, go, are there any questions you want me to revisit? Just because then you're kind of covering all bases in case you've not quite answered the question correctly or shown the value that they want to see. You just kind of give yourself that second chance.
Sure, that's great, thanks. And Uwe, but can I come to you on that one as well in terms of the nerves and how did you stay composed?
On the first point about the nerves, I would just say remind yourself of how hard you have worked to get to this point. As Annabelle mentioned, most firms will get more than 1,000 applications, and to get to an assessment centre, you are usually the final 30, sometimes even the final 10. And so you have done incredibly well to get to this stage. You've gone through the ungodly psychometric test, you've done the video interviews, which everyone hates. So now this is your opportunity to really show what the early careers person thought would make you a good solicitor apprentice in practice, really bring out the best possible version of yourself and put the best foot forward. That being said, everyone knows this is a high stress situation, and naturally people are just going to be a bit anxious. If you do slip up, don't see that as the end of the world. I know that in one of my assessment centers, in the interview, I actually had a complete mind blank on one of the questions that they asked me. So the question was, tell us about a recent business story that we've worked on. And I had a business story that I was so incredibly passionate about. I knew all of the details about it. In the heat of the moment, I had a mind blank. So I did what people call a strategic sip, in that I had a sip of water and I paused for 5 seconds. I still couldn't think about that case. It just completely left me. So I just mentioned the next best case I could think about. In that moment, I thought, yeah, I'm not going to get this offer, but I'm here now. I'd rather just make the best of this opportunity and actually use it as practice. It was only after the assessment center that I reflected on it. And I thought, actually, that probably made me look better, because it showed that I was clearly well read about the firm, as I could instantly find a second case study. And it also showed that I was resilient. So never count yourself out, even if you've made a mistake. You don't know how the early careers people or the partner or the associate, whoever is interviewing you, is going to perceive it. So keep trying, put your best foot forward, and eventually you'll get the outcome that you were looking for.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah, that's really good advice from you both there. And this sort of this next question builds on that quite strongly. So if I come back to Jake on this one initially, assessment centres are obviously designed to test candidates in those final stages, to whittle down what may be 50, 60 candidates down to those last few who are going to get offers. How do you think candidates can go about compartmentalising if things don't go quite as planned on the day, and how can they bounce back later on in the assessment centre process?
I think the assessment centre is a very constructive process, and no matter what the outcome is, you're always going to have learned something on the day. You have got that in-person interview experience. You have made some valuable connections, and I think most firms will give you some form of detailed feedback, which doesn't happen much throughout the rest of the application process. So I think no matter what, it's always a positive experience. Obviously, if you get a rejection, that's not the outcome you wanted. it's very difficult to deal with that when you've been so close. So I think it's just really having a backup plan, thinking, okay, if I don't get this, here's what the plan is for the future. Kind of view getting a positive outcome as a benefit rather than what your plan hinges on.
That's great. Thank you, Jake. What about you, Kevin? Any tips on that and how to deal with a potential setback early on in the assessment centre?
It's a really good question. It's a really difficult thing. I would just say that you realize that you're talking to humans. So on a day-to-day basis, when I'm talking to clients, I make mistakes. I fumble over things, and I completely understand why people do that. And no one is sitting there judging you if you've fallen back. Actually, if you make a mistake, if you feel stupid, and you come back from that, that is a really good demonstration of showing you've got the qualities to do the job. You're being resilient, you are being driven, you're coming back from it, and you're going to have to do that in the job. It's a difficult job. So it's a really difficult thing to do on the day, but you just need to try and move past it and realize that no one is looking at you judgmentally and thinking, well, that's game over for that. No one is there to do that. People are in part putting you under pressure to see how you handle those situations. You can imagine that on that day, everyone is going to make a mistake. Everyone is going to think, I haven't done something as well as I wish I could. Ube's been talking about his experience. I've been incredibly impressed by Ube all the way through this and how well he prepared for his interview. But he's talking about how he missed one point on the day and he came back from that. So you just need to bear that in mind. Everyone will be having those moments. Just push through it, put it out of your mind, and come back from it, and then turn what feels like a loss into a massive victory.
That's great. Thank you, Kevin. What about you, Annabelle? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, you just have to remember that it's such a competitive process and it doesn't define you if in the end of an assessment process it doesn't go as planned. It's really important to get the firm that's right for you as well. And it may be that, on reflection in a year or a couple of years, if you end up somewhere else or on a slightly different route, you may think back and think, oh yeah, actually that really wasn't for me. So I think it's all about, keeping a positive mindset. It's very competitive but to get qualified, to become to complete a training contract or do an solicitor apprenticeship. So to be able to get a solicitor apprenticeship and kind of get your foot through the door so early on is such a great thing. But there are obviously so many other routes out there. And I think it's always every year there's more and more opportunities as more and more firms start doing them, which is great. But we all understand it's very competitive. So I think just keep an open mind and kind of be positive as you kind of work your way through the process.
That's great. Thank you. Finally, if I come to you, Ube, on that.
Yeah, I would just say it's having the confidence to keep going. It was like I said earlier, I thought I made a huge blunder, and that after that moment where I forgot what case study I was going to talk about, that I was just not going to get an offer. But that wasn't the case. I did actually get the offer to reassure you that firms don't actually care if you've made a mistake. It's actually about your recovery, how you come back from that. Because indirectly, that in itself shows a very important skill in a solicitor apprentice, which is resilience. This is a 6-year program. Inevitably, there is going to be a moment where you've done something wrong, where you've made a mistake. No one's going to judge you for that, but it's actually about how you pick yourself up. So just keep putting your best foot forward for each exercise. Remember that each of them are independent from each other. So each of the different assessors will give their feedback. So maybe if you've done really well in one other exercise and you've demonstrated a skill which the other assessor could not assess, then that way you can still bring out your full potential.
That's brilliant. Thank you all for that. So that does conclude our session as we've had it scripted. If we move on now to the Q&A session, I can see that there's a couple already coming in, so feel free to keep those coming. The first one's for Ube, if I direct that to you. One of our attendees says, thank you for the advice, Ube. You mentioned the pesto structure, which sounds really helpful. Could you just explain a little bit more about the anagram and how we could apply that? Thank you in advance.
Yeah, so it's the PESTLE framework. So P starting with political, E starting for economic, S standing for social, T standing for technological, L standing for legal, and E standing for ethical, and or environmental, whichever one I got wrong the other way around for E. But essentially, it's just going through each and every single one of those and actually deciding how does this come into play. So, for example, if you're thinking about things from an environmental perspective, you can think about things like carbon dioxide emissions. You can think about how certain supply chains work. It's just a really good foundation for you to have. You don't necessarily have to go through things in that specific order. The whole point of it is just so whenever you do have that mind blank or where you don't actually have a starting point, you just have those few factors you can think about, and you will immediately be able to think of something along those lines. So you will be able to start somewhere, and then from that you can just build on those foundations and really develop on them further.
That's great. Thank you, Ube. Another one of our attendees says, with written exercises, do you have any tips on preparing for different communication styles? For example, letters, emails, and how do we navigate advising clients and analysing documents in the same style as solicitor would? I can just see Jake's given some feedback on that. Jake, do you mind just talking us through the feedback you've given on that one?
Yeah, so it's kind of relating back to what I said earlier. No one in the assessment centre is expecting you to have this amazing technical knowledge of the legal world. It's really just, focus on how to write formally. Can you have the right tone that's appropriate for the task? Can you format your answer properly? Is your writing clear, concise? And then they also asked about analyzing documents. So I said, read through twice. Everyone misses stuff in a document. I don't think anyone gets every bit of information the first time. So giving it a second read, taking that time, which can be difficult in a time-pressured task, but just giving yourself that extra read through to make sure you've got all the necessary details.
That's some excellent advice. Thank you, Jake. If I come to Annabelle on that one as well.
Yeah, I would recommend for any writing tasks, really think about the structure. So thinking about our case study, there will be kind of clues in the instructions about what questions we want you to answer, what you want to, and what you should include in that question. And typically there will be a lot more information about this around this. So the key is really, thinking, okay, oh, this is the question, this is what they're looking for, and making sure that the information you're actually putting in your answer is relevant. And then think about how it's being presented. I think bullet points or a table are always going to go down well with lawyers when they're looking at the finished product. They want it to be clear, concise, well written. If the case study is saying, oh, we need this for the client, you could do a little draft email for the supervisor and then a draft email to send to the client. It really depends on the situation. But I think typically, for us, it's going to be asking you to write like a research memo or an email. It's probably not going to be a formal letter, but obviously that will depend. That will depend on the firm. You can always ask the firm, for more information in advance. As I said, we do a webinar before. People can email, people can call. We'll tell you, as much kind of information as we're able to. If we can't tell you exactly what it is, we might be able to give you some advice on things to think about. So always worth asking if you're not sure.
That's great. Thank you, Annabelle. If I come to you finally on that, Kevin, and some advice from the written exercise at Slaughter and May.
Yeah, so I think it links to what a lot of people have said on this, but we're not looking to trip you up, and actually a lot of it is in the question. So your teachers would have told you this in your GCSEs or your A levels or whatever it may be, but read what we are asking you, because actually that will almost always tell you what it is. So it might say, prepare an email to the client, and then you're writing in the style of an email, or write a memo addressed to Paul Leamy at City Century, and then that's what you need to do. So don't it's a time pressured scenario when you're doing the written exercise. There's a specific time limit. Make sure you spend the time reading the question, because we are telling you in that exactly what we want to see and what we are looking for, what the style will be and what we're looking out for. So, read the question is really the top tip.
That's great. Thank you all for those. Just while we give one more or maybe 2 more minutes just for anyone to bring in some Q&As into the function, I'm just going to talk a little bit about someone's asked if this is being recorded. Yes, so at the moment, City Century is in the process of getting a YouTube account set up, and we will use that to integrate our full recordings, our full hour-long recordings of the AskCC series, along with a lot of our other series that we're running. We'll get those in full on the YouTube page, which will then be integrated within the website. As a lot of you have already seen and been engaging with, as I've seen on LinkedIn, we do post a highlights reel, which I will compile within this week and get up at some point, which will just sort of summarize some top tips that I've taken away myself, and myself and Paul will discuss as well from our session tonight. So keep an eye out for that one coming up. If we don't have any other Q&As, which I can't see any more popping up, I'll pass over to you, Paul, for your top tips and takeaways.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Finn, and thanks to all of the panel for such some amazing contributions to all of the questions that we've been asked by the audience. And I always find this so hard because I'm tasked with distilling it down to 3 top tips, and I think we've had lots of top tips during the course of today's episode. But for me, there's 3 things I think that really sort of stand out to me from what I've heard today and from my own experience of being involved with the assessment centres at my previous firm, Taylor Wessing. And the first one for me is really that authenticity piece. It's about kind of bringing your whole self into the process, and that's all the way through the process. So from the application form to the online assessments that people have talked about, and through to the assessment centre exercises. Make sure you're bringing your whole self into the process. Don't try to second guess what you think the person at the other side of the table or the other end of the online process wants you to be. A lot of this is really about the firm getting to know you and getting to know the real you. And so staying authentic and staying true to yourself is really important. And I think it's also important that you get to know the firm and you get to understand the firm and make that really big decision, which is such a big decision at such an early age to make, that the firm is the right firm for you. And frankly, if you feel that you need to change and not be your authentic self for that particular firm, then perhaps they're not the right firm for you, and perhaps you should be looking to other firms that are offering the apprenticeship route. My next one is and the panel have spoken about it quite a bit today, which is take your time and stay composed and really answer the questions that have been asked. So I've often seen it in the interview scenario where you can see the candidate's mind whirling, and they're looking for that stock answer because they've prepared so well and they've gone through all of these kind of sample questions that you can find, which are really helpful in getting you to think about your own experiences and how they might relate to the scenario that the question's about. But really think about the question that's being asked, and don't just throw out quickly one of the stock answers that you've prepared. And that really is about taking your time. It's not necessary to come with an instantaneous response to every question that you're asked. It's okay to kind of step back, take a moment, take a sip of your water, and really think about it, so that you come back with your strongest answer to the question that's being asked. And I think that's the same with all elements of the application process. Rushing, if you rush any part of it, you're really not going to deliver your best quality. And then my final point is really one about how you present yourself, and this one for me is really important. When you go to a firm for an assessment day, you're going to interact with lots of different people within the business. You're going to interact with the security guard at the front of the building. You're going to interact with the reception staff. You may well interact with some of the catering staff who are bringing refreshments into the room. Make sure that all of those interactions, you're speaking with the people you're interacting with in the way that you would want those people to speak with you. So I always say treat every one of those interactions as if it's the managing partner at the firm, because all of these people are so important to the business. A law firm wouldn't function if it didn't have all of the people that I've mentioned there working with them to make the business a successful business. And so it's really about kind of respecting the different roles that people have within the business, and recognizing that you are being observed throughout the course of the day. And so just my top tip really is just be nice, and be nice to everyone who you meet at the firm. And I wish you all the very best of luck with your assessment centres. That's all from me, I think, in terms of the top tips that I had.
Thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate that. So our next Ask CC episode 4, will be on the 24th of February. So we've got a little bit of a break now. And that will be quite a special one, focusing on relocating to the city for a solicitor apprenticeship. And a lot of the work that we're doing at CC at the moment is looking around making those opportunities more accessible for people who aren't necessarily within a commutable distance to London. So if that is applicable to you, then that's definitely one to get involved with and to get engaged with, because we've got a great panel lined up who are going to talk all about their experiences moving from the regions into the city for their solicitor apprenticeship. I'd like to thank the panel again. I think you've been absolutely incredible, and I know you've certainly given me some incredible insights for hopefully some assessment centres that will come around. And I hope to see you all at another City Centre event soon. And I wish you, as Paul did, all the best of luck with your applications, and I hope you have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Thanks all.